people like to necessarily say when they're in the audience. I think they get worried.
Rosie's answered in the Q&A box. So,
oh, excellent. Hi.
I am. Hi, everyone. Good. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to start the proceedings now. My name's Ben. I'm owner of our bookshop. On my screen, I've got Neil to the side of me, and below Lucy and Libby. I'm sure you're all seeing different formats of formations. It's an absolute honour to have you both here. Thank you very much. We've been chatting, obviously, before everyone arrived. I didn't know that you guys didn't actually know each other, and this is all a little bit. It's been put together by publicists behind your back, sort of putting it together. So it's an honour to have the two of you together for the first time.
Well, it's really lovely to meet a new author on a screen.
Exactly.
That's all we can do these days, certainly for the next month or two, but hopefully we see. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Neil to be the main questioner, but I'm going to be bullying the audience into supplying questions. So keep making comments, use the Q&A function, and use the chat function, and I will chip in with all your comments as and when you make them. So fantastic. Over to you, Neil.
Thank you very much. Hello, lovely to meet you both.
Hi.
So we're here to talk about your two books. So Lucy, yours is The Promise, and Libby got the Welcome to the 24-Hour Cafe. Both fabulous books. We'll get to talking about them in a bit more detail later on. But for now, I'd like to go into a bit more kind of about you guys as authors. Now, obviously, there's two of you, different stories, but we'll just kind of bat it around and just chat however you want. So, we should start with Lucy. You're on my left. Tell me about tell me about how you get to start writing a book. How do you get your ideas? Like, where does it come from? Your inspiration?
Oh, well, that has been the hardest thing about lockdown for me, because I get my inspiration from being out in the world, meeting people, eavesdropping on people, just doing stuff, noticing tiny things that spark off, like, oh my God, that's weird. Oh God, what would happen if blah, 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 So I found it so strange being inside and having all of that cut off. I can't wait to get it back out there and get back in the real world for those sort of things. But I've just had to mine my imagination, really. And I often go through several different ideas or characters. I just sort of jumble them about a bit for quite a while before I work out what the actual story is. I never plan anything. I wish I could, but I start off with a vague idea and some characters, and then I see where they go. And so many times I find myself in a sort of dead end of a narrative where I think, oh, actually, no, that's not the story. No, I need to go back and try something else. So it's all trial and error, which is really annoying. I've written 16 novels now, and you'd have thought I'd have a better system than just like blundering through the story, but that's how I do it. And
I love that, the idea that, this is like, as I do more of these interviews, I find that authors often don't plan. Like, Libby, do you plan your stories out? Because I've only done like 3 other ones, and people just haven't planned their stories. They just start writing. So Libby, how do you do it? You the same?
I kind of force myself. I think naturally I wouldn't. I'm not really a natural planner. I think I love the writing part so much. It's the bit that feels really fun, that planning feels more like work. But on the other hand, I do find that when I get writer's block, it's because I haven't thought enough about what's going to happen next. So I do try. I guess I usually have a sense of where it's going. So kind of the overall place that it's going to end up at. The middle is usually more murky. But sometimes I do, if I've hit a roadblock, I might sit down and plan out the next few chapters and then write to that. But I think it's nice having some flexibility. I mean, I've heard of writers who plan out every single chapter, and I mean, that obviously works for some people, but I think I'd find that quite hard to find the motivation to then sit and write it, because it would be more like kind of, homework rather than just the fun of seeing where your characters can take you, really.
I agree. I've tried planning things out like that, because me too. I've met authors who just know everything that's going to happen, and I've tried doing that, and then it just kills it off for me. I feel like, well, I know what's going to happen now, so what's the point in writing it? So
I was here interviewing Anne Cleves, and you think she's one of those great planners. She's got a whole idea, and no, not a clue. She sits with a blank piece of paper and just starts writing, and she discovers the storyline at the same time the reader does. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Do you find, Libby? I find that I get about halfway through and I think I've just got no idea where this is going. How am I going to resolve this? And then I always have a bit of a moan to my family about, oh God, I think this is the book that's going to break me. I can't do it. I think I'm just going to get a proper job and give up. But they say, well, you say this every single time, remember? So I just know that is part of the journey.
And I definitely, things like, for me, just going out for a walk and sometimes just getting away from it can make such a difference. If you don't know where it's heading and are feeling a bit stuck, I think, just anything that can get you kind of your mind a bit freer. And it's exactly why, like you said, Lucy, it's been quite challenging this year, not being able to get out and about and have that sort of creative stimulation.
I was going to say, because of lockdown, because you're not having to go out there, do you think it's like you're saying, Lucy, that you're going to kind of digging into your actual imagination for it? So do you think it's going to spark off different kind of narratives in your heads? Like, do you find that either of you, your next books, maybe not this one, but the next ones are going to be like a completely different style because of all this, because you have been able to be out there sitting in coffee shops and things?
I sent some of the book I'm writing over to my agent recently, and she read it. She was like, well, I can tell this is written in lockdown because I think I've given it, I don't know, I've given them less drama. I think there's quite a lot of drama going on in my own life, and I think I just wanted things to be a bit easier for my characters. So yeah, it's sort of restricting me that way. Maybe I'm going to go back and give everybody a bit more drama, but I don't know really. I certainly never want to write a book about COVID or lockdown. I think we're all just sick of it.
Yeah, so, enough living it.
Yeah. So I've really enjoyed getting away from that in fiction, reading and writing, just completely different scenarios and different times. But no, I haven't started writing a thriller or horror or anything like that.
I wouldn't have thought consciously that it has changed things, but interestingly, the book that I have been writing this year, in some ways it's kind of more like, typically my previous books have been very inspired by like a real place that I visited, whereas the next one I've kind of ventured a bit further afield. I think because I can't travel, I've spent endless hours on Google Maps going to places I haven't been and kind of just exploring the streets, and it is amazing, like an amazing resource to feel like you're there. And I guess, previously I would have just actually gone outside and kind of tried to find those stories, perhaps more locally. But
I think that's really true. I did another one of these interviews with Ruth Jones, who'd written a real kind of beach book, but I read it in autumn, winter. But it didn't matter. Like, normally that would annoy me because I've done summer, but I think because we've been shut in, actually to read a book that had like bits set in Greece and a bit here, actually you're like, oh, that's what I want. Like, I want something different. I want a bit something else. So actually, I think going somewhere new with it is good. But neither of you have gone sci-fi or horror.
No.
In previous,
I would like that if I did, given that he only reads sci-fi. But no.
In previous pandemics, some of the most incredible art came out of them. Over the centuries. I can't imagine. I don't know if this one will be a case. But I've had a question, Karen Weston from Macmillan. Which authors inspired you both? So Lucy, you first.
Gosh, well, like a lot of people, I've done some weird reading actually over lockdown. I found that I didn't want to read anything contemporary for a while because I was just sick of the real world and contemporary events. So I've actually gone back and I've read lots of classics, which I don't usually do. I've even read Middlemarch, which I was supposed to read for my degree 30 years ago.
I still haven't finished that one.
Yeah. And I've just found a lot of comfort in Jane Austen and Dickens and, that sort of book, and also historical fiction too. Saying that, I've just read the new one by Emma Jane Unsworth called Adults, which is sat on paperback. That is brilliant. And I feel like that has jerked me out of my slight reading slump because it was really funny. It was absolutely great. Made me laugh loads of times. So yeah, I've enjoyed that. It's been such a long time that I feel like I've read, so many books during this time. It's hard to pick one out, but that's my most recent brilliant read. So I recommend that.
And Libby, you're in a book club, aren't you?
Um,
So you do an online book club, or you have something on your website? But
I have a newsletter where I share book recommendations. I also have a WhatsApp group with a lot of women who I've never actually met, where we share book recommendations. And I'd say most of the books I read come from that group, and it is brilliant, really, just kind of sharing things we've been enjoying. But I've definitely been reading so much during lockdown. I think it's such just that escape. And I guess, I'm lucky in that I do have more time on my hands now. I think for lots of people, actually, lockdown has been even more hectic, if you're homeschooling and, having to work from home and everything. But I have had more time. I think generally, like, when asked about authors who inspire me, I always think back to the books that I read when I was a child. I think because, that was when really the spark of, a love for reading and writing came from. I think all those early books had a huge influence. But then, there are so many authors now whose writing I absolutely love and just really enjoy reading and kind of learning from as well.
I read My Sister the Serial Killer. Have you read that one? It's not recent. It's not recent. I think I just heard her interviewed on the radio yesterday, and it's good because it's so different. Like, that's what I've liked in lockdown, is reading books that are different, like have like a bit of a thing about them. So yeah, I would recommend that one. It is good. It sounds gruesome, but it's not.
About a question from Caroline Hogg. It's a very literary question, actually. Are there any words or phrases that always pop up over and over in your first draft without you realizing? And this is probably a relationship thing with your editor in terms of, I would also say, is there any certain bits of punctuation you use way too much? Or Lucy, go through what words you use.
Oh, I use just a lot. Trying to think. Somebody wrote to me recently and said, you keep saying never usually in books, like, oh, I never usually do this, and it doesn't make sense. And I thought, God, no, it doesn't, does it? You can't say never usually, even though I do in speech. I say it all the time, and I wrote back and said, God, I'm really sorry, that's probably in all of my books because I do say it all the time. So yeah, I'm trying not to say never usually anymore because it's a tautology. What else? I use a lot of semicolons. I don't know.
And Libby?
I think it really depends on the book. I remember when I wrote The Lido, it was actually my agent who pointed out that the word damp was one of the most commonly used words in the book. I was like, well, Lidos, they are quite damp places. And I then obviously went through and changed it. But I think, perhaps depending on, and then, I think, was it, there was, I don't know whether it was my most recent one that's coming out in June. I think someone picked up that people had lots of cups of tea, that, lots of people were drinking cups of tea, but I was like, it's set in the UK, of course.
That's life.
So it's, things like that, I guess, more than specific.
But also, you do use, like in the 24 Hour Cafe, you use lots of italics for a reason.
Right. Well, yes, I guess in terms of do you mean specifically like the flashback sections and things?
Just moving on, yeah. So like with that one, I think sometimes you can use things for a good reason, and it kind of makes things stand out, doesn't it? So it's good. With both your books, they're set in. Actually, the problem is that set in London, Lucy?
Yeah,
it is, isn't it? So you're both set in London. Did you intend to set books in cities? Do cities sometimes inform the story that you're writing? Like, is that something you intend? You went in thinking this has to be a London-based book. We should go Libby first. You go first.
So my first two books, so The Lido and The 24 Hour Cafe, both are set in London. I guess because that's where I've been living for the last 10 years. And I have found the city a very inspiring place to live. I think in terms of, I think all writers really, we're fascinated in people and their stories. So I think a city is just really ripe for that, in that there are just so many people and you can kind of imagine their stories. And specifically the 24 Hour Cafe, it being set in a cafe over a 24-hour period. I mean, that's very much inspired by my love of going and people watching in cafes and just thinking, oh, I wonder who that person is and what their story is, and maybe hearing snippets of conversations. I find that very inspiring. But for my next book, so my third book, which is out in June, it's set on a remote Scottish island, which was inspired by a trip to a remote Scottish island. And I'm actually moving soon, so I wonder whether in future I'll feature London a bit less, given that my life kind of will be taking place elsewhere.
And is the pace of your next one very different? So also 24-hour cafe it's not frantic, but there's a lot going on, isn't it? Like it changes, there's people coming in, people going out. Like, is your Scottish one going to be a much kind of softer, smoother kind of feel to it?
I mean, I think the 24-hour kind of structure provided an interesting challenge in the kind of keeping the pace up, but also, I guess, broadening the scope. So there are flashbacks to kind of moments that happen outside of the cafe. I guess my next book, The Island Home, is more of a kind of traditional timeline in that it takes place, I guess, over a few months, and isn't within that format. I mean, I guess in terms of pace, I think there's moments of kind of more kind of gentler moments, but there are also, it's a lot about kind of family conflict and resolving conflict and kind of secrets being uncovered within a family and new friendships forming and things. So I think there is quite a lot of kind of stuff happening as well, but hopefully in a an engaging way rather than a too much going on sort of way.
I can't wait, though. Sounds good. And then talking about secrets in families leads us nicely back to you, Lucy. Why did you think The Promise needed to be set in London? Or could it have been anything?
I've set my books all over the place, really, and usually I set them in a place where I'd quite like to spend a bit of time. So, they've been setting.
You get like a tax,
smart thinking, hey?
To that place.
Some of those have been set in York,
Maldives. That's about you.
Yeah, I'm working on that one.
We're missing a trick. We should do that.
I know. Well,
tax deductible.
Trip.
So London, I don't know really. I wanted one of the characters has like a property rental business, so I thought, well, it's got to be in a city, and it'd be good to have lots going on. But really, I like to mix things up. The book I'm writing at the moment is set in Cambridge and Scarborough and New York and a bit of Edinburgh. So normally I'd have gone to all those places. Obviously not been able to, but yeah, I'm really hoping I can get a few trips in as soon as possible for research, i.e. being in a nice hotel away from my kids.
But I dream of that. Can you imagine just knocking the door and there's no children outside banging or asking questions?
I know. That's when they started.
At the moment, you're terrifying me.
Oh, sorry. That's fine. It's all...
No, they want just not in lockdown.
Question from Emma Holyland. Do you change the title of your book several times, or do you always know what the novel will be called? I guess from the start, has it got a name when you first start writing them? Lucy, do you want to start with that?
My books are usually called like Book 17, First Draft, that sort of thing, for quite a while. And then a phrase might come out of the text, just sort of suggest itself that, something that a character says. And I think, oh, well, that works with the theme of the book. But quite often, I and my agent and my editor all have really different ideas, and sales and marketing have different ideas. So we end up having a massive sort of brainstorm together, so we can find something that everybody likes. And that is one of my least favourite parts of the whole process. Unless you settle on a title really quickly and you all love it straight away, it does happen sometimes, but otherwise it's quite stressful because the title is really important and it's got to say something. It's got to do quite a lot of work on the cover, so you've got to get it right. And everyone, of course, has got an opinion on that. So, yeah, I found that really stressful. So, not sort of one.
You must also find when they get translated into other countries or go to other territories.
Yes,
that's a whole different thing. I mean, I don't know.
That is interesting.
Does Lido translate into American? I don't know. Is that?
So that it's called Mornings with Rosemary in America.
Oh.
And then it's difficult because lots of countries don't have Lidos, so it might be they use just the word for swimming pool instead, or something completely different.
Swimming pool's just not the same, is it? It's just
Lido's much nicer.
absolutely. Absolutely.
I
Was it always called Lido when you started writing it?
To me it was, but I think exactly like Lucy said, you know, it's a very collaborative process, and you know, different people for different reasons have different thoughts. You know, it's I guess, you know, how you're going to market a book and how you're going to sell it, it's kind of different things might work for different people. So I think it can be difficult coming to something. I guess it is quite subjective. I think that it's how do you definitively say this is the right title, but I think it's just kind of a collaborative process really of trying to pick what you think is the best one and go with that. And although the title is important, I think, you know, there's a lot of other things that are used to market the book, you know, in terms of a blurb, you know, just the description of the book, the cover, there's, you know, there are other things as well, so it's kind of the whole package really and how it all works together.
The name The Promise that has a feel of a, you know, it's gone round in terms of what else could The Promise have been named?
Oh gosh, when I first started, when I first submitted it, I think we were calling it something like The Secret Hero, because the main character sort of tries to do the right thing. But then my agent pointed out, well, when this is published, you know, who knows what's going to be happening with the pandemic? And actually the word hero is going to be applied to nurses and doctors, people on the front line. People might just feel actually doesn't quite work with this like slightly hapless character. Is he really heroic? So we settled on The Promise because the main character does sort of make a promise to himself and the rest of the family, but it's also about showing promise, you know, how, you know, promise to be a better person, that sort of promise. So yeah. But oh god, we went through so many titles. And you find you're like plucking them out of songs and anything, just to, you can't even listen or hear if they sound good anymore after a while. They're just words. But anyway, we always get there in the end.
Yeah. And could the 24-hour cafe have been named anything else? Was there another title?
I think there were variations on that theme. So kind of the all-night cafe, just the cafe. I mean, I kind of felt that the 24-hour element was important because it's, you know, it's not just a Starbucks, it's this fact that it is you know, open all day and all night, and that kind of brings its own you know, why is someone in, and that's what really kind of inspired me, is, you know, why is someone in a cafe at 2 a.m. or, you know, 4 a.m. and but yeah, there are different variations of that kind of thing.
With the 24-hour cafe, like, I love the idea of it. Did you have fun playing with that timeline? It's quite tricky. When I started it, I was like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do 24 hours in this book? And then it took it, it just went on so brilliantly. Was that something that was a challenge, or was it quite fun to do that? Or did it just flow? Did it just all kind of come out?
No, it was very challenging. And the book that exists now is very, very different to my first draft. My very initial concept, I wanted to write 24 characters over 24 hours. I quickly realized that that's quite a lot of stories. And also I think for a reader, you want the satisfaction of, you know, I did want some, and there are some characters who sort of come and go, you know, you get a snippet of their story, and then as in life, you know, you then don't get, you know, they disappear. But I also think
very London as well. I think that's very London, that kind of transient sense of London where you're meeting people and then they go, yeah, sorry.
But I think, you know, you also want that satisfaction of characters that you come to really be invested in and root for. So I then kind of built in two main characters who are waitresses who work there, and you know, their friendship and their kind of backstory is very much kind of the thread holding it all together. But it definitely required a lot of editing. I had a big pin board with each hour and who would be in the cafe, what would be happening, and I guess trying to have a mix of kind of stories and emotions, so that, you know, if you had a couple of different characters coming in, that they had quite different stories, so you had a sort of variety throughout. But yes, it was very, I mean, it's very, I think more so than the Lido, it was much more of a kind of chopping and changing and I got rid of whole characters and backstories, and it yeah, it was a much bigger editing process, but interesting to kind of challenge myself in that way.
When like metaphorically the customers came into your cafe, did you find that you knew where they were going to go with their story? Because obviously, as you say, some came and went. Like there was I'm so sorry, I've totally forgotten his name, and he was, well, no, I don't want to give away. One of the characters. But I loved him at the beginning, coming in all sad. We know who we're talking about. And then he sat there, and as he came in, I'm like, I want to know more about his person. And so, did you go to these characters thinking, I want to explore this more? Or there was the couple who were arguing, or this, that, that. Did you know who was going to stay and who was going to just go?
Yeah, I definitely think I had the characters who were really kind of special characters to me, who I wanted to be more of, you know, have more time in the book, and I guess be more, not just bit parts, but have their own kind of story arc as well. I mean, I would have liked to kind of do that for every single character, but I think it's just, you know, how much can you fit in one book, and also just making sure that, you know, readers do become really invested. Those few characters that you really pull out, that readers hopefully become really invested in them, rather than trying to make you care about 24 different characters. So it was definitely a balance. But I think, and even the characters that I didn't necessarily have time to go, you know, much into their backstory, I think it's something I definitely thought about. And, you know, in my head, I have, you know, what happened to them and all of that.
So I think you can tell that in the book. I think you can tell that. I think there's that thing, you know, when you sit in the cafe and you read people and you're like, oh, that person's got this, the other. It was like reading that. It was like reading a book of what goes on in my head when I sit in a cafe and look at people. And that was so lovely that you're actually getting that gift of carrying on, finding out more about them. So I did like them. Did you know any of those people? Like your two main, the two main characters, are they people you know, or
no characters are ever, you know, 100% based on people I know, but definitely have elements. And certainly, so both the main characters, as well as being waitresses, you know, they're pursuing kind of creative careers, and that's something that I've had experience of in terms of, you know, having always wanted to be a writer, but then kind of having to do the day job, you know, for a while to do that on the side. But I also have friends in all sorts of different creative industries, and I think it's a real challenge often, that thing of, you know, pursuing your passion, but also the reality of kind of paying the bills, and, you know, how long do you pursue your dream for, until you kind of think maybe it's not going to happen, you know, but also if you kind of stick at it for a bit longer, that could be when you get your big break. So I definitely have lots of friends in my life who either have gone through that or are still going through that, and I think that was something that I definitely wanted to explore. So I think, you know, I've taken elements of all of those things really and created new characters from that.
I'll just jump in with a question. Donna Pryor, do you have characters that you want to go back to and write about again? And when Libby, you've written obviously the couple of books. Are there characters within that you'd like to?
I mean, I think, you know, any writer, you know, you do come to love your characters, so part of you would like it to go back to. I guess so far, I think the stories that I've written have felt kind of like a complete story. But who knows? I mean, actually, the book that I've got coming out in June, I can see it's set on an island community, and I mean, similarly, I didn't really have time to kind of go into all of the characters there and all of their backstories. So there are definitely people there that I can see wanting to revisit in future. But then also, you know, you have so many ideas for new stories and new characters that it's kind of it's exciting to kind of come up with those as well.
Fantastic. And Lucy, you've written so many characters. Are there any of them you particularly want to go back to?
Same answer really. I love my characters, and by the end of a book I feel I know them really, really well. I feel, you know, I've met them and everything about them. But I do always finish the book and think, right, okay, you've all ended up where you need to be. And to start a new novel, I have to sort of shake everything up again for those characters. And sometimes you think, oh, actually, I've left them in a really good place. I don't want to make life difficult for them. But saying that, the idea of writing sort of a trilogy where you can stay with the same characters over, you know, a long period of time does appeal to me. But I've not done it yet. Maybe one day.
Just thinking about kind of the kind of story you guys both write. Like, if you think about, we talked earlier about, you know, the genre you're in, because you've both been labelled as that thing that makes me wince slightly, the chick lit kind of thing, which just makes my back go up a little bit. And then Libby, you've been kind of classed as being uplit, which, to be honest, I don't really understand what that is. So where do you put yourself, or what's your feeling on this, or do you think that is such a dated kind of description that should be gone, really? So Lucy, where do you put yourself? Or usually you write books.
When people say what sort of books do you write, I just say commercial fiction. So I find like chick lit really reductive and patronising. And what does that mean? You know, I don't really write books about chicks, you know. I just write books about women, ordinary women, having extraordinary things happen to them, and, you know, facing difficult things with courage and humour and grit, and just like all women do. You know, I'm not writing about superstars or models or anything. I'm just writing about people like me, my friends, people you'd meet, your sisters, you know. So I don't know. I think people are very keen to pigeonhole and put a label on you, and I just resist all of that. Because I don't want anyone to feel that my books are not for them. So I just say commercial fiction.
But the other one, I learned another thing, like domestic thriller. And it's like, I've never heard that phrase before. And it's like, domestic what? It's just because it's got a main female lead and there is setting somewhere in a home.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, seriously, it's just a thriller. It's just a thriller.
I know. It's like, how do you define like David Nichols's books? I mean, because, you know, I would think that Libby and I are writing similar. I mean, obviously, he's absolutely brilliant, but, you know, it's a similar sort of area, but no one's calling his books chick lit or women's fiction or anything like that, are they? They're just fiction. So, yeah.
Libby, you the same. Did you like the chick lit?
Honestly, I think that kind of all of that is nothing really to do with us as the authors. I mean, we write the books and we just write stories that we're interested in and people are interested in, and all of that is much more of the kind of how it's marketed. And in some ways I can understand why terms like that exist, because, you know, from a practical perspective of, you know, a bookshop owner, you have, how are you going to organize your shelves and where are you going to group books together, and kind of finding common kind of themes or styles of stories. I can see a benefit for that. But I mean, the terms themselves, I mean, chick lit, I agree, you know, with everything Lucy said. And I think it is often that, you know, books that involve women can be kind of often reduced in a way that the exact same story with male characters would, you know, be kind of taken much more seriously. But I mean, on the other hand, I kind of think as long as if people read and like my books, I don't really care what term they use to describe them. I think it's but it's difficult because I can see that they're useful tools, but it can feel quite reductive.
On Amazon, it means they can put them in a certain page.
In our shop, it's just fiction. We've just got one huge wall, the entire one side.
Yeah,
great.
It's fiction. You know, in the end, I don't think I'm that good enough shop owner to be able to disseminate who's one or another.
I think for readers to be able to, and that's something I just miss so much in lockdown, is that I think I'm perhaps not discovering books in the same way, because, you know, you go into a bookshop and you find yourself drawn to something that you have never heard of before, or just a book that you happen to pull off a shelf and, you know, then totally fall in love with. So I think
I agree.
The bookshop is really nice.
Right, let's do another question from tell you what, I mean, George. In fact, George picked his book up earlier. How much say do you have in the cover design for your books, Lucy?
Quite a bit. You know, it's like the title, it's collaborative. We all want to feel that we love the cover. So yeah, I get shown drawings first and mock-ups, and then, you know, great care is taken over each element. We went through so many, like, I mean, the proof you've got is blue, but my new book is actually this lovely coral colour. So we go through loads of different like colour combinations and styles. The font gets switched around for the title. So yeah, I do get a say in all of it, which is really nice. But it's not my area of expertise, so you know.
You've got plenty of books on your, you know, in your catalogue. Do you get as excited now as you did in the first couple of?
Yes, yeah, I do. It's so exciting every single time. Not quite as exciting as seeing it in an actual bookshop. That's the best bit, but yeah, it's a real thrill when you get the email saying, "Oh, here's your cover. What do you think?" And it's like, ugh. And it's seeing how someone else has interpreted your story in the visual way is really, really interesting. And seeing the difference with the covers, you know, through different languages, foreign editions, that's really interesting as well. So I had a cover for my for a translation of a book called Something to Tell You the other day, which is set in York. I won't say which publisher, but a foreign publisher sent through a proof saying, you know, what do you think of this cover? And it was of this woman walking down to a beach. And I have to say, well, it's a lovely picture, but York isn't by the sea. So I think anyone who reads it who's ever been to York will think, why is there a beach here on the cover? So yeah, so I'm glad I did get some say in that cover as well, because they've changed it pretty rapidly.
Brilliant. What I'm going to do tomorrow, first thing, I'll take a photo of your book in our bookshop, because I didn't think you'd have missed that, but I hosted a few debut novelists recently, and I made a point of getting their photo taken and posting it on Twitter. And I didn't realise you'd be that excited as well.
I remember when the Lido first came out, I would go into every bookshop and look for it, and I actually got caught out. I think actually I did it with the hardback for the 24-hour cafe as well. I got caught out in a local bookshop because I went up and was stroking it, and I heard this voice behind me. I was like, "Oh, Libby, like you can sign them for us if you like." And it was the shop's manager who obviously had recognised me, and I was like, "Oh, this is so embarrassing." But she did reassure me that all authors do it, so it wasn't just me picking it up and stroking it. But I definitely think that cover, you know, seeing the cover is such a big moment. It's kind of when it feels very real. But you know, as nice as it is to be involved in the process, I think I'm also very aware that I'm a words person. I mean, I like looking at the images that are created, but I would never think that I could kind of come up with an idea for it really. So it's quite, I find it fascinating seeing what you know, what the designers come up with.
Question for Lucy. From Amanda Pontin. Would you ever write a prequel or sequel to One Night in Italy?
Oh, I loved writing that. Probably not, but you know, I never say never. I never rule anything out. People ask this sort of thing, and I could never give a blanket no. I'm not thinking about that at the moment, but you know, I did really enjoy writing those characters. So thank you for the suggestion, and if I do, I will let you know.
Fantastic. Neil, I'll leave you.
Enjoy listening to questions. I think let's talk a little bit more about the actual books. Let's get into a bit more kind of nitty gritty. So, it's in my hand, so no preference. So Libby, give everyone your notes, because I'm really bad when I describe the books, I end up giving away things, and then that bit happens. And what about when this it's paper, because you're practiced at it? Tell us about your book. Tell us like the story. Tell us a bit of blurb about it.
So as the name would suggest, the 24-hour cafe is set in a 24-hour cafe called Stella's, which is based on Liverpool Street in London. And it is set over one 24-hour period, and it tells the story of Hannah and Mona, who are two waitresses who work there. They're also best friends and housemates. Hannah is an aspiring singer, and Mona is an aspiring dancer. And I guess the book is very much about kind of their friendship, the ups and downs and challenges of female friendship, and kind of their personal journeys as they kind of try to pursue their creative passions really. But then alongside that, their story, you have the various characters who come in throughout all hours of the day and night, and you kind of get a sense of them, and you know, they've all got their own in the same way that I think we all do, you know, they all have their own kind of stuff going on. So I hope in a way that, you know, there's kind of something for everyone in there, that there might be a kind of life experience that one of the characters is going through that people can particularly relate to, and that's been really nice with feedback of that, you know, there seem to be certain characters that people do particularly respond to based on, you know, their own circumstances. So yeah, that's about kind of friendship and community.
Well, I really love that. Have you ever worked in a cafe as a waitress? So, like, I've worked as a waiter in restaurants, whatever, and there is that real sense of community among the people who work there. And so I love the fact that you really felt like, you know, the chefs were looking out for Hannah and Mona, like they were looking out for each other the whole time. So have you actually worked in a cafe that's been like that?
So I haven't, but I have lots of friends who have, and definitely that kind of element of the kind of camaraderie of it. And I think particularly, I've had friends who worked in bars, and I think that thing of working at night, and given that it's a 24-hour cafe, you know, lots of their shifts are at night, I think there's that different, it adds another dimension to it. And in a way, I think you kind of bond even more because you're there when, you know, the rest of the city's asleep, and you kind of have that time that's quite, that other people aren't experiencing. So I think that kind of sense of the bonds of the people within the you know, the staff, but also the regulars in the cafe as well. I think that kind of, you know, from people I know who've worked in bars and cafes and restaurants, that is an element of the community as well, the kind of the customers that you have coming in.
Definitely. I also think the fact that you're working, like you're saying, because London never sleeps, but it does. There are those moments when bars and clubs are closed, nothing's opened yet. And I think it's that I could really see that those moments, or that time slot where it was kind of almost dead outside. And then I love the way you painted the fact that the city began waking up again. People coming through, and it was such a lovely flow through all of it. With the flashbacks, did you always plan to have the flashbacks in there? Was that something that you felt you needed for their backstory? And
I mean, the book went through so many kind of iterations that I can't really remember at what point those came in. But I think when I wanted to include Hannah and Mona and their friendship to be a real big part of the story, I think I wanted to show more of their backstory. And I think, you know, one of the big inspirations was wanting to write, I guess, kind of like a love story, but about female friendship, because I think actually, you know, friendships within my own life, you know, I've actually known longer than my husband. And, you know, I think you go through those same cycles of where, you know, you meet someone and there's that instant connection and you want to spend all your time together, but then also times when perhaps you're not on the same page or kind of drift apart. And I think using the flashbacks as a way to hopefully demonstrate kind of the depth of their friendship, but also the challenges that they both faced in their relationship.
I have to admit, I did think it was going to turn out that Hannah wanted more out of that friendship. Like there was a way they got so close, and she was so kind of the fact that their first meeting was almost like eyes met across the room, and there was a connection. But you're saying that could be friendship as well. Absolutely.
I mean, my experience is that is friendship. You know, I think I have so many friends where, you know, there's just that instant connection, and, you know, it is very much like meeting someone kind of romantically, in that, you know, just that spark of interest in one another. And I think, you know, female friendships, they can be so deep and so thoughtful as well. If I think of some of the things that my girlfriends kind of do for me and that we do for each other, like, I mean, my husband is very kind and very thoughtful, but I don't think that he would think, you know, the kind of thoughtful messages and the kind of, I don't know, I think there is, but then on the other hand, I think you can also have the not seeing eye to eye and I think hurting one another, that I think when you perhaps not in the same way that a romantic relationship, I think with friendships you can sometimes take one another for granted. And I think I definitely wanted to explore that, of how, you know, friendships are things we need to nurture in the same way that a marriage, you know, it doesn't just happen, you have to put in kind of work into it as well.
Yeah, no, I think you definitely did that. I'm doing that thing where I'm like, I can't talk about that, I shouldn't talk about that. And I think you really do that in that book, and I think that it's very clearly done. The sense of friendships are different, and there's a bit more, can't say that. Yeah.
I mean, I'd be interested, obviously Lucy and I are the two women here, I don't know how you feel, Lucy, but I think, you know, for me, although I'm very lucky to have a very lovely husband, I think there was a stage when I thought, you know, my partner has to be everything to me. You know, they have to be the person that I turn to and talk about every single thing on my mind. But actually, just because I'm married doesn't mean I don't need my female friends. You know, they're still so important, and actually, you know, each in their own way kind of provide quite a different, you know, a different relationship, really.
I
but
totally agree, and I've really missed seeing friends through lockdown. I just can't wait to be able to, you know, catch up with everybody. I mean, he's on the phone, and you know, sometimes met for walks and things, but it's really not the same. Cracking open a bottle of wine and go, right, come on. I think we've all got friends that you can say anything to, that become more like sisters, where you can, you know, really confide in them, and you know they won't judge you or, you know, reveal any secrets. They just there to support you and make you laugh. And
no, it's good. So let's talk about the promise.
Okay.
So move on to the promise. So again, so give birth. So tell everyone about your book.
Okay. Well, initially for me, the main character is actually a man called Dan. And at the start, unexpectedly, Dan sort of blames himself to some extent, because he was the last person. He thinks he was the last person to see Patrick alive. So to try and redeem himself, he draws up a plan that he will step into Patrick's shoes and sort of like pick up the pieces in his absence. Because he's a bit of a nerd, he draws up a spreadsheet listing all the things he's going to do. So he helps Patrick's wife, Zoe, and their kids. He sort of makes an effort with all of them. And he also takes the reins of Patrick's business, which is like property rentals. So he's dealing with a large number of tenants as well. And, you know, he's fine doing all of this because he's always really looked up to Patrick. He's always thought the world of him. But as he sort of gets more involved in Patrick's life, Dan starts to realise that, you know, maybe he is not the golden boy that everyone always thought. And he discovers some secrets that Patrick has been keeping. So he has to decide, what am I going to do with these secrets? Because he knows that potentially they are going to change a lot of people's lives. So that's the premise.
I love that premise. Like, it's such a good premise, especially because it's his brother, and so you have that kind of family of like you're saying about friends. It's the same kind of thing where you're kind of, I need to hold on to this because it's his private life, but then some of those secrets.
I know. yeah.
And it's how was it writing from a male point of view? You're saying that's not really your style.
Well, it hasn't been till now, and I sort of thought, God, I just wanted a bit of a challenge, actually. I was about halfway through, and I heard a really good interview between Max Porter and Sarah Moss back when he had been her editor at The Favour, I think. And she had written from the point of view of a man, and he had read it, and he said, well, the only thing that's wrong is that this male character isn't thinking about his, what do I say, tackle every 3 minutes. I'm afraid that's what men do. I was like, oh God, have I got to put all that sort of thing in? So I got my husband to read. He always reads my books, and I said, will you just tell me any bits that you think, oh, a man wouldn't say that, a man wouldn't think that, you know, that's just wrong. And he came out and he said, no, it's pretty good. I said, the only thing is, all the men call each other mate all the time. so I did tone some of the mate stuff down, but actually maybe we're not that dissimilar, men and women. I really enjoyed writing as Dan. It was really good, just as a writing exercise, if nothing else.
It's really flawless. The jump, I think both of you did really good, flawless kind of between the male perspective, female perspective, because there are bits in both. Like, and I think he would be glaring, but it wasn't too rampant. I also loved the spreadsheet. I thought when he first started it, I was like, oh well, that's sensible. Yeah.
I'm thinking the same thing. He gets
of course I would do that.
It's like, yeah, I'm thinking about my to-do list that I do that are just so detailed.
I think we can't talk about how it goes, but I would. I'd do a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Things up.
I know. It's satisfying, isn't it, when you can do a little tick, done that.
Basically sticker chart. My kids always like sticker chart. So yeah, so maybe not.
Yeah.
Nikki Golding asks, do you have a writing routine or a typical writing day? Lucy, that's a good question for you.
Well, my writing routine, I've got 3 kids, well, 2 sort of university age now, although only one's there at the moment. So I'd just sort of, once they were all out of the house, I'd get on and write until they came back from school or college or whatever, and walk the dog, but I'd be on my own, just writing about 2,000 words a day. And actually, when lockdown started, lots of people said, oh, well, authors are all right. You're used to working at home. You're used to getting on with it. But actually having a house full of like 5 of us and a dog and a cat was actually a nightmare at first. It was really hard to concentrate. So I think routines have really gone out the window, with the lockdown, because, my house is full of teenagers and, all the rest of it. So, yeah, I just treat it like a job. I don't sort of waft around waiting for the muse. I just sit down, try and write 2,000 words a day, and depending where I am, along the book, if the nearer I get to the end, the faster I go, because I'm sort of really building up momentum, and by then I'm sort of like, oh, it's all clicking into place, and I actually know how it's going to end. So it's lovely that the last sort of quarter of the book where you think, okay, I know what's going to happen, and I'm just cruising on.
I love the fact that you've got a target of 2,000. We interviewed Lisa Jewell two nights ago, and her target's 1,000 a day.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Libby, what's your routine?
Well, I'm a real morning person, so I tend to do most of my writing in the morning. I like to do some kind of exercise. I find it's just so vital just for my kind of mental well-being, I think. And I think because writing is such a creative thing, I think it's hard to, another reason why this year's been so difficult. I think, you have to be in a good headspace to be able to come up with creative ideas. So whether that's, doing kind of work at home or going for a walk or a swim, but then getting to work. And yeah, I guess I tend to set a word count rather than number of hours, because I think it can totally depend. If I'm in the flow, it can, I can hit a word count quite quickly, but otherwise, maybe by lunchtime I'm then sort of done and can do other things, or it can be more of a drag. And I think also, having worked previously in an office job, where you're very much at your desk 9 to 5, I kind of think, one of the joys of being an author is you don't have to do that if you don't want to. So I do like having an element of flexibility that, if I have a day where I'm like really in the flow, actually I can just sit and get much more than my word target done, but maybe the next day then I might take some time off and, in normal world, go to an exhibition, or, go for a walk, or go and find a new swimming spot or something. I mean, normally my word target is 1,000 words a day, but kind of as a minimum, I try to do more than that. And more recently, I had picked up the pace on that, because I want to get the next book that I'm working on finished before I have a baby. And then we'll be occupied with other things.
Deadline.
So, kind of, that's been a great motivation to pick up the pace. So yeah, I think it varies, but I think, honestly, after lunchtime, it's a downward slope. So I sometimes will do a bit more, but definitely from about 4 o'clock onwards, I'm good for nothing. So
you don't do things by halves, actually. You're moving house, you're pregnant, you're writing books. That's a remarkable achievement.
For a busy year, but after a year where everything's felt, last year everything felt very much on pause. I think it's it's hectic now, but it's kind of nice to feel like it's moving on a bit.
Yeah. And the physical activity you referred to, is that your outdoor swimming? Is that every day? Is that
it depends really. I haven't unfortunately been able to go swimming for a few months now, because all the local places in lockdown in London are closed down. When I move, I'm hoping there are more local wild places that I can go to. But I also do yoga and just kind of at-home workouts. I got very into Joe Wick's Pee with Joe workouts last summer. Can't really do so much of that now, but doing kind of, lots of pregnancy workout classes. And I think just anything that gets me moving, I find it it just gets the thoughts moving around as well, really. So, but yeah, outdoor swimming is the real passion when I can do that.
Nice question from Donna, actually. It's come in quite late. I'm conscious there's only 5 minutes left. A rare benefit of lockdown has been plenty of author events online to join that may not be able to do in real life. Do you think there is still a place for these once hopefully live events come back again? I'm conscious that neither of you have really done many of these online interviews recently anyway. So I'm going to answer that as a bookseller and say absolutely. I think it's part of the mix now and it will continue. And I'm planning on doing at least one a week, certainly probably early part of the week, and then physical events probably second half of the week towards the weekend. But how do you guys feel about it?
I'm really looking forward to meeting readers again. That is the nicest thing about doing bookshop events, where you can, it's lovely when everyone is in the room together and you can have a laugh and sign books and just meet people who've read your books. It's so lovely. This is great in the meantime, and it's really lovely. Thank you for having us. It's always so nice to talk to another author, and I don't know about you, but I'm just starved of new faces to look at as well. So doing this has been brilliant. And also, I'm sitting here in the living room, so 5 minutes I'll go and get a glass of wine and watch the telly. I don't have to get on a train and go miles home or stay overnight somewhere. So it is brilliant being able to do this sort of event as well. So yeah, hopefully a mix in the future would be lovely.
Yeah, I definitely agree that a mix. I think there is nothing quite like that kind of being in person and getting to, as Lucy said, getting to meet readers. I do miss that. But I think, a great thing about the virtual events is that for both authors and readers, that, you can just, it doesn't matter where you live, that, readers can attend authors, but also, unfortunately in the past, I guess I have done more events sort of in the south just because that's where I live, and time and cost of travel and all that kind of thing does make it more prohibitive to kind of go further afield. I guess for me as well, the thought of juggling, my baby is due basically the same time that my next book comes out, so I think the thought of going around the country doing events unfortunately is not going to be possible, but the thought that I might be able to do some virtual events to promote the book and have that flexibility.
It's great planning. Can I say that's great planning? Yeah. And Amanda makes a good comment. And maybe it could be a mix of both, where you have live and virtual audience. I'd love to be able to see more events. Now, that's one lesson we learned, and we've already done, is what I call a hybrid event. So we'll have physical events which will have a virtual stream, which does make Q&A a very interesting thing, where you've got people asking questions from, West Coast America or
wow, yeah,
it's remarkable. Honestly,
I think when I get back to in-person events, I may want to keep my slippers on. I'm wearing them right now. I have to put actual clothes on. But I actually put some on for the first time in weeks for this. But there is, I like getting dressed up, but yeah, it is quite nice. Just
right.
The slippers on.
Well, I think we may have a theme. A theme for any physical events we do is, and anyone on stage has to wear slippers.
Bring your slippers, yeah.
Have a glass of wine as well.
Yeah, a blanket
or a G&T
coming in, yeah.
But we've got 1 minute left. Let's have a little Beverly Riddell, great book event. Thank you very much. Love Lucy and Libby. Gosh, no, some of these are too long to answer, I think. So we're not going to throw those at you. Can I just huge thank you to Neil for stepping in. Neil also interviewed Lisa Jewell on Monday, so he's had a busy week. Lucy, thank you so much. What are you working on at the moment?
Oh, next book. So yes, I actually had to struggle to remember what the promise was about because my head is just full of the new story. So yeah, new one. Going all right.
Yeah, new one.
That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, fair enough. Libby, what's your one?
So my next book, called The Island Home, set on a remote Scottish island, is coming out in June. And then I actually just this week have submitted the first draft of my next one to my agent.
Brilliant. Well done.
Moment of I've written this for a year and no one else has looked at it. What if it's awful? Quite a scary moment, but exciting too.
So nobody else has seen it. Actually, Margaret Baxter asked the question, are members of your families your main critics?
No. I mean, I did, when I wrote the Lido, because I didn't, have an agent or a publisher then, my mum and sister read it. My husband does read them, but I very early on said to him, your role is to tell me it's wonderful. I've got other people who will tell me, give me constructive criticism. All I need from you is, yes, darling, it's brilliant. So and he does do that. Yeah, no, my agent and editor would be the first people who
Brilliant. Well, listen, we've clicked around to 8 o'clock. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your hour. Thank you to the audience. Stack load of questions that I didn't even get onto. So thank you to Donna and Amanda and Beverly and Nikki and George and Karen and Caroline and Emma and Donna. Yeah, for all those questions. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting you. This interview will be on our YouTube channel tomorrow at some point. It's actually my wife's birthday tomorrow, so I better do it tomorrow. Maybe it may be on Friday. So, but guys, thank you so much, and thank you, Neil, again, and we'll see you very soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.